Welcome back to The Golden Queers by the Outwords Archive, an LA-based project to interview, preserve, and share the stories of LGBTQ elders. With support from the California State Library, Outwords launched this intergenerational queer storytelling podcast to connect queers across all generations.
On each episode, we'll sit down and chat with a queer elder based in California to learn about their lived experiences that shape our lives today, and share back our observations about the future of our community. For all of you tuning in, I'm Jae, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm M.R. Howdy. Welcome back to The Golden Queers.
So, last week we spoke with Yosenio in San Francisco, and this week we're coming at you with another Bay Area story.
What is it about the Bay, Jae?
Man, I don't know. Possibly the gay mecca of the world?
Yeah, I suppose so. What have we got on deck this week, Jae?
So I had the pleasure of sitting down with Arvind Kumar, a South Asian gay man and retired activist. Without further ado, let's roll the tape, MR.
My name is Arvind Kumar, and I am a software engineer who works in San Jose, California. And I was born and brought up in India, and I did my undergrad in India. Came to this country, to the United States, as a graduate student, found a job in California. And I've lived in California since 1982, so I'm an old-timer. So mentally, I'm an Indian, but I've lived in California and the US since 1979. And so I'm an American too. So I have this bicultural identity. Because I grew up in India, I'm very, very rooted in things Indian. But having lived in this country for so long, I have a great appreciation for American culture and the freedom that it gives people and the respect that we accord each other. So that's a short introduction.
It's a wonderful introduction. But you talk about growing up in India. So what was that like growing up? I mean, I'm pretty sure your more later formative years, your high school years happened in the 70s. You talked about a school trip that was very formative for you.
You've got stories out of me I've not told many people.
Oh, well, if you don't want us to talk about it, we totally don't have to.
I love to talk about it. You're right that when I was growing up there, I didn't identify as gay, and it wasn't until I was 15 and we went on this away school trip that took a bunch of kids and with Jesuits priests in charge on a train journey throughout India. And it was on that trip that I made a connection with a fellow classmate. And we were horny little teenagers, and we made out. And that relationship lasted 2 years. So we were boyfriends, except that we didn't call each other that, but we were inseparable. We spent all the time together. And of course, we were physically intimate with each other too. And I think my classmates were well aware, and even the teachers were aware. But homophobia in India is more gentle. So we would get teased, but there was no overt physical threat or violence.
It's very interesting. You use the word gentle. When I think of gentle, I think of niceties. And so to describe homophobia as nice is it's kind of funny.
No. It was not nice. Right. It's never nice. But I guess I'm comparing homophobia in India to homophobia here.
That's so interesting because I would think it would be reversed. But then again, I grew up in America.
Right. No, when Europeans first went to India, they thought that the entire subcontinent was homosexual. And that's the reason for that is because they observe that grown men would touch each other, would hold hands, would walk in public in that manner. Indian culture is homosocial,
Right.
meaning public displays of affection between the same sex are permissible.
Yes.
And in fact, in today's India, public displays of affection between the opposite gender is not acceptable the way it is in the West. So it's a culture where to walk down the street with your friend holding hands doesn't raise eyebrows.
Right.
Friends who are heterosexual will touch each other, pat each other on the back, hang out in the same bed together. There's no sexual connotation to that at all. Only some of us, like me and my boyfriend, managed to break through that barrier and form an intimate relationship. But it makes it easy to hide because nobody thinks there's anything unusual about two guys spending time together. They're considered good friends. Anyway, long story short, that was the first time in my life that I had this physical and emotional relationship with another person. I'm still not thinking of the word gay.
Right.
That relationship didn't last high school, and I went to college. And again in college, I formed another relationship that lasted 6 years. We didn't call ourselves gay, but we made out and we were buddies and all of that. But at the end of college is when I went away to grad school in the United States. It was a very, very alienating time because I was away from my country, my culture, my friends in college. And I was really all alone in a dorm room in the US. And I had a lot of time to think about what is missing in my life. And at the time, I thought it was a phase that I would grow out of. But, what's in your head never goes away. So my 2 years in grad school were really miserable for me because I was not yet ready to accept that I'm going to be this way forever. It wasn't until I got a job and I moved to Palo Alto, California, and I joined Hewlett Packard, and I met gay colleagues.
Right.
And I discovered the Stanford Gay Men's Group that I came to accept myself. So my life as a gay man really began in California.
Right.
As a self-accepting gay man.
Do you think you ever would have accepted yourself, your gay identity, had you remained in India?
It's difficult to predict what that would have been like, but I know that it would not have been easy. I have since met many people from India. In some ways, their path has been harder. In some ways, it's been easier because they haven't left the culture or the country. The India that I grew up in is no longer the country that exists today.
And what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that in India today, Section 377 has been declared invalid, is not constitutional. The Supreme Court of India has affirmed that gay people and trans people have the right to relationships and to existence free from discrimination. And that is the law of the land. And I didn't think it would happen in my lifetime. It makes me very emotional to talk about this, but
of course.
So that's the India that exists today. There are gay groups in every major city in India. More than that, there are gay pride parades in some of the larger cities. I should tell you a little bit about popular culture. So if you're growing up in India in these times, 2 years ago, you would have seen a movie called Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga.
Yes, I've seen that movie. I cried so hard. It was such a beautiful movie. And I believe the actor and actress, they're actually like father and daughter in real life.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So for those who haven't seen it, it's a film about a lesbian relationship. And it's about a girl whose family wants her to get married, but she has a crush on another girl. And what transpires? It's your average Bollywood formula movie, but it's made with the heart of someone who's truly empathetic.
Yes.
The actors are top name actors.
Completely A-list celebrities.
Right. So the second movie I want to mention was last year or 2 years ago now. Movie made called Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan.
I've never watched it.
Starring Ayushmann Khurrana.
Wow.
In the lead. He's a top-rated actor in Bollywood. He plays a gay guy and his lover. And the story is about, the movie starts with the two of them, they're already together. So it's not a rom-com in that they meet and fall in love. The movie starts with the two of them being invited to their cousin's wedding. And how they're going to explain each other's presence at the wedding, the guy who's not related. And it's a farce. It's a comedy, but it's extremely dramatic, melodramatic. But there are sequences in that movie that I've never seen in a Western movie where one of the protagonists is explaining what homosexual love and attraction means to his parents. It's a very powerful scene. It's about 4 minutes long. And he's telling his parents about endorphins and the chemicals in your brain. And when you fall in love for the first time, you're not in control. Your body, your head, your brain are behaving and responding the way, it happens for heterosexuals.
Right. There's no difference. Love is love.
There is no difference. And it's a very powerful scene because the movie is all about the family's homophobia, social homophobia, religious homophobia, and how to counter that, how to, it puts words in your mouth. It puts thoughts in your brain of how to educate people. So that movie was made 2 years ago. And then last year, there's a movie called Chandigarh Kare Ashiki.
No, I never heard of it either.
Also has Ayushmann Khurrana in it.
Wow.
And it's about a trans woman.
Uh-huh.
It's about a guy who transitions to a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the world doesn't know about him. He moves to a new city. She moves to a new city.
Mm-hmm.
And Ayushmann Khurrana falls in love with her. And later on in the movie discovers, she's trans. And he goes through all these emotions of,
Right. Of course.
all
whatever
these
he may feel. Yes.
Yeah, negative emotions. But the nice thing about the movie is that in the movie, you see characters going to the psychiatric, the hospital in Chandigarh, talking to psychiatrists, talking to counselors.
That's new.
And being given accurate medical information. And so you see Ayushmann Khurrana's character transform from a state of transphobia into acceptance and love. So that's what I'm trying to get at when I tell you that I'm so excited about the India of today. It's a country I don't recognize.
Of course.
But, for all the right reasons, it has changed in ways that I think they're a good sign of things to come.
I can't even begin to explain how important Bollywood is in so many various South Asian and South Asian diasporic communities. Okay, personally, this is like my weird theory, but it's our biggest form of propaganda, but that's a story for a whole other time. Bollywood is our favorite medium of storytelling. And just recently, within Bollywood films, we are seeing the introduction of LGBTQ plus stories and characters. Personally, I think I've always thought of India as backwards. In many ways, some thoughts, practices, beliefs, and ideas are backwards. But to hear Arvind speak about these forward-thinking, empathetic, and emotional pieces of storytelling was quite moving for me, especially the movie mentioned by Arvind, Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga. The actor who played the father, Anil Kapoor, has been in many Bollywood movies, and it was great to see him play a role so out of the ordinary for him.
I loved hearing you both speak about Bollywood and the more recent inclusion of LGBTQIA plus characters in these Bollywood films. I mean, it feels like in most cultures, queer and trans folks have been around since literally the dawn of time, but then there's this disconnect when it comes to the media portrayal in public spheres, when then there's this lack of representation and celebration of our queer characters on screen. What do you think's changing in Bollywood right now that makes queer inclusion more possible?
I think it's important to note that South Asian culture and society is homosocial, a word that Arvind mentions a bit before this, and I couldn't think of any other perfect word to describe it, honestly. Oddly enough, advances of public display of affection between cis men and women is looked down upon in India. But it's quite common for cis men to show platonic, unromantic affection to other cis guy friends. So even before cinema and films, India has been quite aware that sexuality is fluid. I mean, of course, colonization came, and then they flipped everything upside down, as it often does. I think now more than ever, young queer youth within India are finding spaces and courage to show that, hey, we exist and we deserve representation and visibility. But let's dive back in. I want to quickly backpedal a little bit. In that moment, what might have been so terrifying for you, coming out to people and saying, like, I am a gay man, and must have been relieving at the same time to know that there were others around you that felt comfortable and vulnerable enough to open up to you too.
It was a very safe space for me. You see, when I was hired, nobody knew about my sexuality. I had not come out to myself either. But even before I went to Stanford, I learned from, hallway conversations, talking to people, what did you do on the weekend? I learned that several people in the group were gay. In fact, my boss's boss, the person who managed the group, he himself was gay. So I had these visible examples of acceptance of how society functions in a situation where your sexuality is never an issue. So when I was ready to come out, it didn't feel like such a challenge,
Right.
because I knew I'd be landing in a comfortable spot with those coworkers. I think I was 26 at the time, 27, and I had been processing this internally for so long that the moment that I came to terms with it myself, I told my brothers, I told my parents, I told my colleagues at work that I was close to. So it was just, I couldn't stay half in the closet, half out.
Right.
Either I was entirely in the closet before that moment, but that transition maybe took 6 months or something. But within 6 months, anyone I knew or cared for was aware.
So you told your parents and your brothers as well?
They were the first, actually. So,
wow, that is so.
Yeah.
I could never. I'm still very much half out, half in.
Well, you have to understand that I was much older by then. I felt like my life had been on hold this whole time, right?
Yeah.
So I think that going to Stanford, meeting the people there, helped me in my process of accepting myself.
Mm-hmm.
But once I was done with it, once I was convinced I'm not going to change, this is who I am,
Mm-hmm.
I saw absolutely no reason to keep it from people that I loved and cared about.
What about your parents?
So my dad was in India. My mom was not local. She was in the US, but she traveled a lot. So I wrote my dad a letter. I didn't tell him face to face. In those days, phone calls were not that common and they were expensive. He had been after me to get married before that. You know, he'd been sending me pictures of eligible girls, right?
Right.
So that was much before then. Now I had, put a stop to it. I said, no, I have absolutely no interest right now. But in this coming out letter, I wrote to him that I'm drawn to men and I see myself meeting a man and settling down with a man. So we didn't communicate too much over email, but he visited me in California many times after that.
Mm-hmm.
He got to meet my partner. And, again, I think he never embraced it the way my brothers have.
Of course.
But he made space for it. So he was uncomfortable marching in the Gay Pride March, for example, where I used to go. I asked him if he would come, but he was not okay with that. So in his way, you would call him homophobic because he still had issues.
Of course.
But in his way, he gave me as much latitude as I wanted. And when he came to visit, Ashok was with me all the time, and he had a great relationship with Ashok. So I count my blessings.
That's
my
good.
mother was another matter. She was the most traditional family member, and she was very upset. I told her face to face when she came to visit. She was very upset. And I said, I know it's new to you and it might take time. Here are some books if you like to read them. I'd done all my homework and I had literature for her to go through, Pete Flack and stuff like that.
Right.
My mom was not interested in any of that. She just wanted to engage with me. So that kind of back and forth went with her for about 4 years or so.
I see.
And then one time I sat down with her and I said, Mom, I've tried very hard to share my life with you, to explain things to you. I'm not going to try anymore. So if you have questions, you can ask me anytime. But if you're not going to change your mind, that's okay. But I'm done trying. She was very hurt when I said that. She was like, what do you mean you're not going to try anymore? She wanted me to keep trying. I said, no, this is your issue now. You got to go away and work on it.
There is this one story that you had mentioned to me in the pre-interview of when you had a cousin that you, I think, were roommates with, and they got married. And so all of you traveled back to India, if I'm correct, for the wedding. And you talk about this moment that happened within you.
Yeah.
And can you talk about that moment? And at that time, were you with your partner? Were you with Ashok at that time?
No.
Okay.
I was single and lonely.
I see.
So what happened was, coming out didn't solve all my life's problems, right?
Right.
Coming out is just one part of the process. I was single for 4 years after that. During this time, my younger cousin, who I'd grown up with in India, came to the California, got a job, settled down. We became roommates. He was a year and a half younger to me, so he's like my little brother. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful guy. He got married, and I went to India for his wedding at the end of 85. And I was very, very happy for him.
So this is before Trikone.
Yeah. This is just before Trikone. This is part of the process of Trikone forming that I was very happy for my cousin, and I was very, very sad for myself. I was like, in my family, age really matters. Everything is done in age sequence, right? So my cousin is getting married out of turn. I should have been married a year and a half ago, right? And there I was, single, lonely. I was out, but I was single. I was turning close to turning 30 at that point. And, I thought life has passed me by. Now I'm an old man. What I was going through is basically observing my family and how I was part of the family and yet not part of the family.
Yeah.
Because I was not part of all the rituals that everyone else was part of.
Interesting. And you started Trikone, correct, with a group of other people?
I started Trikone with a friend. His pen name is Suvir Das.
Okay.
He lives in the Bay Area. And after my coming out, for the next 4 years, I met a lot of gay people, but very few gay South Asians. And I had a very hard time meeting someone that I, liked. And 4 years later, and I still haven't met anyone, and neither has Suvir. So the two of us got together and we basically said, we have to do something to change this. So we're going to start a group. That's how it started.
Yeah, just by sheer will, huh?
Yeah, sheer will. It was an excuse to meet people. And as luck would have it, within a few months of starting Trikone, my letter to the Advocate was published. And it was read by a gentleman in Los Angeles. And he called up his friend in the Bay Area and said, Ashok, you got to read this letter. Now, Ashok was in the Bay Area, but I didn't know him.
Is this your partner?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Ashok is my partner.
Okay.
So Ashok's friend from LA is reading to him the letter over the phone and says, hey, there's an address at the end of this letter. So Ashok writes down the address. And then he writes one letter to Trikone. Okay, addressed to me, of course, but to that PO box.
Of course.
So this was one of those letters that happened to come in the mail. That's how Ashok and I met, through Trikone.
Oh my gosh, no way.
So as far as I'm concerned, Trikone has been a great matchmaking service for me.
Well, yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And how long have you and Ashok been together?
Since 86. You do the math.
Oh my gosh. Almost
30 something.
Yeah.
36 years. Yeah.
About to be, yeah. Around that.
I told you we're old.
No, you're not that old. You're not that old.
No, I don't mind. I don't mind being old. I've been working at it all my whole life to get here.
Yeah, you've got some wisdom on you, that's for sure.
So we, in those times, were basically trying to put people in touch with each other. How do you meet each other? How do you develop a support network? How do you make friends? So we would publish contact names, volunteers in every major city in the US and in India and the subcontinent, people who'd volunteer to take phone calls. We would print their name and phone number. If you need to talk to someone, call so-and-so, right? It was just a way for them to get in touch. We would publish our mailing address, it was a PO box, as a way for people to establish contact via the postal service.
It also wasn't just folks from India. It was also from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and maybe a handful from Pakistan as well, right?
That's right. We got letters from every country in the subcontinent, perhaps except for Bhutan. We got letters from every country there. And part of it was because we marched in the San Francisco Gay Pride Parade in 1986 with the Trikone banner. It was the first time a South Asian group had marched in Gay Pride here. And as a result of that, we got publicity. And there was a gossip magazine in Bombay called Society that decided to do a 2-page spread. about that march. And it was written by a very, very empathetic reporter. And at the end of the article, he printed the P.O. Box address. If you want to get in touch, please write to such and such address. That magazine was apparently widely read all over the subcontinent, not just India. Because it had film stars and gossip and all this stuff in it.
Right.
And that's how we heard from other parts of the subcontinent.
Now you're receiving letters from all over the subcontinent. Are you engaging with these letters? Are you writing back to them? How did you from America, from California, Palo Alto, give support to these people who were global almost?
Yeah, so in those days, the inexpensive mode of communication was by the Postal Service.
Right.
So what we did was we published a quarterly newsletter. It was usually 6 pages, 8 pages, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We would have features, we would have personal stories, we would have classifieds, news items. We sent the newsletter to everybody who responded.
Mm.
And we would have, because the volume of mail was so large, it was impossible for small handful of people to process it.
Mm.
In the Bay Area, we formed a volunteer group that would meet once a month, and it was called the Trikone Mail Processing Party.
Mm.
So it was like a potluck. You came for one evening a month to Arvind and Ashok's house, and you were given a stack of envelopes. You got to open it. You got to enter names and addresses into the database for mailing the next newsletter. And you got to write down a personal response. So volunteers were individually responding to some of these letters that these folks wrote. Nothing could match the benefit of having someone local
of course
there. But at least they got some feedback. It wasn't like their letter was lost in the mail or fell into a bit bucket. So that newsletter published for a long time. It morphed into a magazine that Sandeep Roy edited for many years, and then Ali took over the editorship. I don't think it's publishing very frequently now, but the organization in the Bay Area is still around, and they still organize Pride and things like that. There are South Asian gay groups in every city, major city in the United States, in Toronto, in Vancouver, in London. So if you are of South Asian descent or have an interest in South Asian culture, that's one way to network with the local community. I like to think that the U.S. gay liberation movement has been of help to the Indian gay liberation movement or the South Asian gay liberation movement.
Right.
And I hope that some lessons from the subcontinent can be applied here too.
My, oh my. As a South Asian American queer, it was just really fulfilling to sit down and chat with Arvind. I've been waiting for this conversation since the Outwords Archive mentioned his name, and he's just an amazing storyteller.
He definitely is, and I will most certainly be watching some, if not all of those Bollywood films mentioned by Arvind. I gotta expand that Bollywood cinema knowledge.
Don't forget to join us next time for another episode of The Golden Queers with me, Jae.
And with me, M.R. See you next time.
The Golden Queers is produced, hosted, and edited by Jae Singh and M.R. Raquel, with music provided by Karl Casey at White Bat Audio. Find The Golden Queers online at thegoldenqueers.org. Executive producers for the Outwords Archive are Jack MacCarthy and Bliss, and Outwords Executive Director is Mason Funk. Outwords captures, preserves, and shares the stories of LGBTQ+ elders to build community and catalyze social change. More info at theoutwardsarchive.org. That's Outwords, WORDS. The Golden Queers is funded by a generous grant from the California State Library's Oral History Project. Special thanks to this week's storyteller, Arvind Kumar.